I've long made the allegation that unless you are living on this continent, you would not know it exists because the mainstream media seems to have a giant blind spot. Now, even in our coverage, here at the Florida Maquis, we haven't covered the southern part of South America very heavily. But doing my research, I found an article I think a lot of you will be interested in, and later on in the video, I'm going to reveal for you this article that if everything else were equal, you would already know about it and it would be something you would be talking about. It has to do with this little country called Chile. That unless there's a huge earthquake or you're watching the Discovery Channel, most people don't know about it. It's this tiny little strip of land on the southern part of the western edge of South America. Now, there was this concept years ago, and there still is, I guess. I shouldn't say years ago, but I've seen it long forgotten. It's this idea of bread and circuses. And I pulled up this article from November 2014 to kind of illustrate the change in the thinking of a certain group of people that I used to ally myself with. You see, there was a time when people understood this concept of left and right being part of the same march toward tyranny, and how everything was cyclical. But strangely enough, after the last election cycle, there's a certain group of people that think this is all changed now and everything's fine and wonderful, and we have now achieved the new age of enlightenment and this kind of silliness. But it has to do with this term bread and circuses. That everyone knows, the concept being that if you have a population that is well-fed and entertained, that they will become apolitical. I mean, they might put a bumper sticker on their car, a sign in their front yard, and post something on Facebook, but they won't actually do anything. Now, they have a different term for this in South America. It's called neoliberalism. It has nothing to do with what we call liberalism here. What it has to do with is this idea of the uber wealthy taking control of the government with their partners with big corporations and keeping the unwashed masses entertained and distracted long enough for them to take away all of their rights, all of their power. The idea of a government of the people and for the people goes away. This is what they call, quote unquote, the right wing in South America. It's very different than what we call right and left up here. We've covered this, many, many times. But in this particular article, this guy says something about American politics that is exactly right. And I would challenge anyone out there to say something different. In this article, his name is, let me see I get this right so I can attribute this properly. Atilio Boron warns about bread and circuses, neoliberalism, in Latin America. And the cases that he used are Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. Depolitization. He talks about there can't really be democracy in a country where this exists. And he uses the United States as an example. This is the example I wanted to give for you. This is what he said. In the case of the United States, he pointed out that the majority of the congressmen of this nation are millionaires or billionaires, which only represent 1% of the population of that country. Besides that, this nation tries to give examples of democracy to sovereign countries, while in its constitution that word isn't mentioned once. What legislation can emerge from a body where more than half are millionaires or billionaires? And how many millionaires are there in American society? They do not reach 1%. That's what they call representative democracy. This is a joke. Of course they make legislation for them. And then we go to South and Latin America and preach to them about constitutional republic and all this kind of stuff, when we have a tax system, by the way, in this country that Marx would be proud of. And we also have a heavily armed Stasi to enforce it. Something else Stalin and Lenin and Marx would have been very much for. So this guy nails it. He absolutely nails this. And when we used to, I mean, when you look at this, there was a group of people in this country that had this nailed too. This is only 2014 where this was seen. And now it's been ignored, largely ignored, since 2016, late 2016. Now, Chile. If you looked at the mainstream media, you might see this story about the huge spike in the price of avocados in Chile. Or maybe you would see something like this. You know, that you would look a little deeper and see that the dictator that we installed in Chile back in the 70s died, and the courts down there have seized his property and now are giving it back to their people, given that he was hiding money in American banks. But here's the story that unless you were really looking through Spanish language websites, you wouldn't know about. And it's this one. Now, why would Chile be doing this? When you read this article, it's very disturbing. Not disturbing in the sense that you should, be fearful, but disclosure might be coming, but not in the way that anyone thought. I'm going to try to read through this without botching this, but sometimes translations are a little bit sketchy. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defense yesterday led the first session of the Council of Antarctic Policy, where the 3 commanders-in-chief of the armed forces of Chile also attended. They had their Minister of Public Works, the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force of Chile, talking about this, how to enhance, modernize, adapt, and update the presence of Chile in Antarctica. Chile is playing a leading role in the White Continent, and it's necessary to maintain it. Maintain what? Implies modifications, renewal, and resources. Now, the treaty doesn't expire until 2048. So what's going on down there now that all of a sudden has Chile also fired up worried about the modernization of their bases? In recent years, the consultative parties to the Antarctic Treaty have intensified their scientific activity on the continent. Listen to this. From the scientific point of view, the National Program of Antarctic Science went from developing 14 projects in 2006 to 101 in the last season, along with increasing the number of scientists. Now, this is the gateway to the Antarctic, a place called Punta Arenas. It's kind of funny that we were just talking about bread and circuses, and they call this the bread. But this is the part that I was really kind of taken aback by. The Ministry of National Defense and its dependent institutions are linked to the Antarctic Directorate, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the body responsible for conducting the national Antarctic policy for the purposes of its participation in the Antarctic affairs. Here, they're trying to get around this, saying that in this framework, the armed forces, the idea that you can't have military presence in Antarctica, that's part of the treaty, carry out an effective task of presence and logistical and operational support for national activities. Meaning that they're saying, well, yeah, they're military assets, but they're only going to be used in a support role. But this is what's happening in Antarctica. That they are investing a ton of money in upgrading, using their military in Antarctica. And just to give folks a real quick idea here, when you go all the way down here to the bottom of the continent, Chile kind of takes over the tip here. And this area down here is called Punta Arenas. Right here. And this is the gateway to Antarctica. So as you can see how close it is. So something is going on down there where the Chileans have all of a sudden decided they want to dump a bunch of money into Antarctica. Now, I know there are channels that do nothing all day, every day, but sit and scour every square inch of this continent to look for something to put on YouTube, so I'm not going to pretend to be some kind of an expert on this, but I did a quick basic look here, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it again. Maybe I will. There it is. There is this weird little black triangle. It looks like they were trying to cover something up here. Out here, and I'm sure a lot of you have already seen this because I actually searched it, and there's a Pinterest page that has this. So I'm not going to pretend that I've just discovered something. But very, very odd. Either it's a very bad job of pixelization, or there's something out there they don't want you to see. So like I said, Secure Team 10 and a whole bunch of other channels know a whole lot more about this than I do. The point of this was that the Chileans upgrading their bases using their military in Antarctica probably would be something most Americans would like to hear. But you won't. You absolutely won't hear it. Because there is this blackout from our media. And I think it has a lot to do and is related to this idea of bread and circuses. That they'll keep us entertained so that we don't know the important things going on in the world. So, we'll leave it there. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for your support. We will see you later. Thank you.